After weeks of CJ Stroud being projected by pundits and Vegas as definitively going to the Carolina Panthers, there's been some movement and a lot more speculation that possibly Bryce Young would go to the Carolina Panthers, which would presumably make CJ Stroud the favorite to go to the Texans. I'm going to be honest with you. I've been so heavily biased in favor of Bryce Young without having any actual animosity or criticisms, or harsh criticisms of CJ Stroud, that I admitted yesterday that I hadn't gone out of my way to really learn more about CJ Stroud's personality. I've watched these guys on film a lot. And one of our listeners from Payne and Pendergast in the morning had suggested that I go watch the Pivot podcast, in which they interviewed CJ Stroud and B. John Robinson together before last year's college football season. And I'll be honest with you, I was impressed. I was really, really impressed. We'll jump right into it. I've got a few clips from it, but he started off just basically answering a question since he's from Southern California, as is Bryce Young, why did he choose not to go to USC?
I have a lot of big offers until my senior season. I went to the Elite 11 camp.
Oh, sorry. Here he is. Okay. He's had wasn't recruited very heavily at all until his senior season. And he's talking about how he went to an Elite 11 camp the summer before his senior season and how it went for him.
Yeah. And I kind of had a good camp there. Won the MVP against dudes that were way more higher ranked than me. I was 2-star, 3-star. I don't know. I really didn't care. I just wanted to go play and compete. So that's kind of like my thing. I love competing. I went to the camp, had a good camp. Realized, like, man, I can do this. Like, at first I didn't have a lot of confidence going in. Like, man, these dudes probably can sling it. And I'm going out there, man, like, they can't really hold me a little bit. Like, you know what I'm saying? So,
like, honestly, what I started to learn about CJ Stroud from reading more about his off-field stuff and from this interview was just, he did not have the normal trajectory of today's modern quarterbacks where they're identified and offered scholarships when they're freshmen in high school. 5 stars, top recruits in the country, go off to Alabama like Bryce Young. That it was a much slower rise for him, and there were issues with his family that we'll talk about a little as this goes on. They were pretty extreme. And the one lesson I got from a lot of this, I think, is that this guy has had a more difficult road, and he had some challenges placed in front of him that, frankly, they create character, but it's always a matter of, okay, how quickly does it create character? You know, a lot of us don't really figure out until we're like 35 or 40 how to forgive people from when we were younger and how to really learn the lessons that life has given you. And with quarterbacks, it's a question of, okay, can you learn those life lessons in the course of just a couple of years? And I saw some pretty good stuff here. As far as why he did not go to Southern California,
they didn't start recruiting me till 2 weeks before signing day. They were on Bryce and DJ so heavy.
Okay, so that's just real quick. As far as having chip on his shoulder, I think that's another theme that comes up. As far as, like, he didn't go to USC, they didn't start recruiting him because he was just this kid that showed up kind of out of nowhere. Went from being a 2 or 3-star recruit to an Ohio State caliber type of guy. And he kind of like he's very careful not to take shots directly at USC, but he talks about when he goes to visit Ohio State, it was just a much different atmosphere than it was at UCLA or USC at that point. And again, he's got a chip on his shoulder, but like you can see he consciously works at keeping his focus and not getting too wrapped up in it. And he talks about it in a couple of these clips upcoming that's just way more mature than a lot of young guys. As far as NIL, if you haven't watched the Pivot podcast or YouTube channel, there's a link to it below. It's awesome. It's Fred Taylor, former teammate of mine, Ryan Clark, who's Ryan Clark, and Channing Crowder, who played the NFL for a little bit, but mostly he's a full-time radio host in Miami now, who's just really, really funny. And these guys were really intrigued by NIL because remember, they're talking to Bijan Robinson and CJ Stroud before their final year in college. And like NIL is just blowing all of us old heads minds out of the water with what is available to these kids and just how do they deal with it, all this money being thrown at them. And I thought that like CJ Stroud gave as honest and I think as forthcoming an answers about it. And he talked about what it was like when it first started getting thrown at him?
Early on, it was kind of confusing for me. Just like kind of like just navigating how many people were coming at me, you know what I mean? And just the route we were trying to take as a team, and then trying to not be selfish and then do my thing and try to make enough money to provide for my family, you know what I mean? So you got to keep the main thing.
Right.
And a lot of people really, like, they think they know what that means, but until you do it, you really don't, you feel me? So you got to just, like, stay grounded and have a good foundation and understand. Like, my mama, she don't press me. Like, kids is getting pressed by their parents for money. And like, my mama's never done that for me. Like, she just want me to be great in whatever I do. Just, son, just go out there and have fun.
Okay, so that's another big part right there is when he talks about his mom not pressing him for money. So a few things from that clip. One is just keeping the main thing the main thing. That's a cliche. It's said a lot, especially to young star athletes, and it's easy to remember, and it makes sense, except it's really, really hard to do. Like many things in life that are simple and easy to remember, it's still harder to execute. The fact that he mentioned that his mom doesn't ask for anything, like I don't mean to paint it like it's a bad thing if parents ever ask for anything, but his situation, you'll find out, I didn't realize a lot of people still didn't know this, was his dad was arrested when CJ was 13 or 14 years old. There's a long story behind it, but from that point on, obviously it was a much different life for him because his dad had been a pastor in the church. It wasn't like he was a career criminal or anything. This was a huge, drastic change in his life, and he was all of a sudden, single parent household as a young teenager and trying to play football and learn a lot of these lessons. But the fact that, like, he talked about guys, some people having their parents pressure them for stuff. I mean, you get to the NFL and there's some guys whose parents, I knew a guy once who bought his dad a really nice sports car, which is awesome. But the player did a smart thing, which was he bought a sports car that had 6,000 miles on it. You get that, that used car discount where it's still a relatively brand new car. And his dad refused delivery because he was insulted that his son would buy him a used car. So like that's the extreme. There's some kids that are just still dealing with that, where they feel like so much pressure from their parents. And, he talks in this interview, it's a long interview, it's like an hour long, about wanting to help his family, but also some of the lessons he's learned along the way about how to help not just family, but friends. And there's a way to go about it. It's just really good stuff. He's learned a lot of the lessons because of NIL that a lot of guys don't learn until their first, second, third years in the NFL, because these kids have already had the pressure of playing at a big time school, but also having people, have expectations, perhaps unfair expectations. And it's nice to hear that CJ Stroud's mom isn't one of the people with those unfair expectations. As far as the financial education part of it, David Mulligetta is his agent, which I know is very polarizing. I don't think it's an issue with the Texans because David Mulligetta and Nick Caserio worked together on what ended up being a extreme record-breaking contract for Deshaun Watson. A lot of the issues that I think Deshaun Watson had with the Texans were rooted in the Jack Easterby / Bill O'Brien era. And I think a lot of that reflected poorly on Cal McNair at the time. But I think that David Mulligetta understands that a lot of that is past. So I don't think that's an issue. But as far as how Athletes First and David Mulligetta helped these guys manage NIL, it's interesting because, again, I think it's a little bit more of an education.
That's something like they teaching us financial literacy. They're not just giving us these deals. They're giving us deals with equity and not just showing us the money, but like showing us how we get into it and how to pay our bills and things like that. You know what I mean? So it's definitely like kudos to them.
Okay, so as far as the financial education part of it, like that's really cool. And I think a lot of agents are going to do that, but that is the simple stuff that when you get to the NFL and you have all these pressures on you and you're making good money for the first time in your life, probably living on your own in an apartment for the first time in your life and having to pay everything. Like, it sounds simple and stupid, but it's stuff that you're managing while also having a really high level of expectations on you. These guys have a head start with that. And the big thing about it that I really liked from CJ Stroud, and this came up when Sean Pendergast and I were talking about this yesterday morning, there's a Manning passing academy, basically like Gruden QB camp, but the Mannings are doing it this year. And Bryce Young, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, and I believe Hendon Hooker are all participating in it. And we wondered, why is CJ Stroud not participating in it? One of our listeners suggested maybe it's because he just one, he declared late, so that might be part of it. But two was just this part, and I again really impressed with the maturity of CJ Stroud here.
And I had to slow it down. I asked Brian Burney, our marketing guy, during the season, I just felt like it was getting a little too hectic. So I was like, hey, can we please slow it down? You know what I'm saying? I just got to focus on ball. Because I know if you play good, you're going to get some money. You know what I mean? Right. So, but if you don't, you focus on other things, you can get distracted. You're going to be thinking about too much. And I just feel like that wasn't my case. And by the glory of God, they were supportive of that. And then we got it rolling right when the season was done. So.
Yeah, and look, if I'm going to be cynical about it, which I can be at times, guys know what to say. Guys know the right thing to say. There's just so many common themes that come up as he's talking to these guys. And the really cool thing about the pivot with Ryan Clark and Fred Taylor and Channing Crowder is like they really pull the good stuff out of these guys because they can relate to him as players. You can tell the players respect him. And then also, I think Ryan Clark might be represented by David Mulligetta. But they have a relationship. So there's a trust level here, and I think you get some good candid answers out of here. I actually there are a couple clips where I would think that CJ Stroud might have showed a little more than he wanted to that I didn't put in here because this is propaganda. It's not. It's just I can't spend all day on here with this. So as far as one last NIL thing, Channing Crowder was just really intrigued with like, how is this set up? Do you just get a check? Are they paying you weekly, monthly? How does it all work? And I thought this was interesting just from the mechanics of how these college kids are actually accepting their payment.
But it's all set up by monthly. You know what I'm saying? What am I going to do with $600,000 right there? You feel me? So that's just like, that's not being smart.
Wait. Yeah. What is he going to do with $600,000 right there?
I know you got But like, yeah, we still like, when I first started getting some money, I was 19. I'm 20 now, and like I just feel I have a lot of life to learn and still go through. So like, I asked them like, just like, can you set something up with me to where like I can have some money on the side and some money to spend, be comfortable, help my mom out, help my sister, help my brothers. You feel me? So I just feel like that was like the reason like why I wasn't getting all the money right up front.
Okay, so like that part, I like obviously I really like that. And now, how much of that was his decision versus David Mulligetta's decision? Either way, I feel like he's having good guidance there. I know we have our own raw emotions from the entire Deshaun Watson, David Mulligetta scenario. For those of you who aren't aware, David Mulligetta represented Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson requested a trade several months after signing a huge contract. Eventually got the trade. There were a few other details to that entire situation. If you're watching this channel and you don't know that story, I encourage you to just go Google that because the 75% of this channel for the next 7 months isn't going to make sense to you if you don't understand the backstory behind all that. Real quick, I'm not going to do much about actual football here, but because it came up, Sid asked, Bryce throwing guys open while CJ throwing to open guys. What do you think about that, Seth? With two question marks. So I believe that you're skeptical of CJ Stroud. Yeah, I think Bryce Young is a more intuitive, better football player and prospect. The one thing that's helped me hedge my emotional bets is Bryce Young's extremely small stature. So the entire time I've been keeping it open that, okay, it might be CJ Stroud. I do think that Bryce Young has demonstrated more improvisational ability, more ability and understanding of how to throw guys open. He's also dealt with a higher level of adversity. CJ Stroud doesn't have control over that. One thing I will say also about CJ Stroud throwing to the open guy, Ohio State does have option route concepts where guys are going to be, the receivers will be responding to what coverage they see. And then, CJ Stroud has to have a feel for and an understanding of the same thing and be on the same page as receivers. So yes, those are awesome receivers. But they're also wide open by design of the offense, and CJ Stroud has to understand that. So that's more of the football stuff. I'm going to try to keep this more to the personality and leadership side of stuff for now, because this is the part that I haven't explored as much with CJ Stroud. This part, I'm going to set this up a little bit. Garrett Wilson was on the Pivot podcast last year before his rookie season, and let's see. It was kind of an eye-opener to him when these guys told him exactly what the rookie dinner is like and exactly what it entails.
know they gonna run that bill up like 75,000.
Oh yeah, what you mean like the Louis the 13th you gonna have to buy at the restaurant?
They ain't doing me for 75K. I ain't gonna fake it.
Nah. It's the rookie dinner. It's all of y'all.
You the 10th pick of the draft too. They know you got 20 guaranteed.
Wait, what you say, rookie dinner? He thinks it's his decision.
It was so cute. It was so cute.
Hey, listen.
75. They told me about the dinner. I gotta take all the receivers to a dinner. It's gonna be cool. I'm excited for that.
It's not gonna be cool.
You know they gonna run that bill up like 70.
Yeah. Hold on a second. So yeah, it's messed up, man, and it's bogus. It's really bogus. It's usually one guy or two guys maybe that are running the bill up. Like with the Texans, I can remember the offensive lineman. There was one guy that would order like the super expensive liquor. All of a sudden, he'd be a wine expert and want the $3,000 bottle of wine. So it's messed up. And again, this is where it gets interesting. I don't think this is going to be like a Ryan Leaf situation where Ryan Leaf was telling Junior Seau to bleep off and everything at times. But these guys have been coached well, Bijan Robinson and CJ Stroud, about not being just loose and fast and easy with their money. So this is CJ Stroud talking about that dynamic because obviously he knows Garrett Wilson from Ohio State.
But like I think what you said about G5, like G5
Garrett Wilson.
The way it caught him off guard was kind of funny, but like, nah, that's real though. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, some people like really be running up on the rookies, man. Like I don't know if I could do all that, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's all about respect, like he said. But at the same time, like, y'all gotta respect me too. You feel me? So
Well,
okay, yeah. So like that part is all about respect. The good thing, and Ryan Clark points this out, with quarterbacks, you got three guys in the room. 4 at most, and the fourth guy doesn't really count because he's either a rookie or a practice squad guy or whatever. So I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think that I don't think Case Keenum's going to go out. Case Keenum's the last guy that would go out and run the bill up on him. And since Sid, listen, man, you're going to bring me down as I'm trying to be a beacon of positivity here. That agent is known to be a pain in the ass for organizations. Yeah, you know what? Who else is? I'm going to tell you what, Sid. I'm ashamed of you for not paying attention to the saga of one Jose Altuve, who is represented by one Scott Boras, who's also known to be a pain in the ass to Major League Baseball agents. This is the thing. Agents work for the client. So the agent does what the client wants. I think David Mulligetta does a really good job of getting what his clients want, which, yeah, is a pain in the ass to organizations, can be a pain in the ass to teams. What has Jose Altuve done with the Astros? He hasn't tested free agency. He's got an agent who is notorious for pushing his agents to test free agency, a la Carlos Correa and whatnot. And Altuve hires Boras, and Boras works for him. So, I mean, like, you can't be afraid of the agent. David Mulligetta does now and will continue to represent a lot of the very best football players in football. So if you start to exclude all of his clients, you're going to be excluding yourself from some really good players. I also I get it. I totally understand it. Ryan Clark then asked CJ Stroud, in the face of getting all of this money from NIL, millions of dollars from NIL. I don't know what his exact number was or what that was speculated to have been, but CJ Stroud made a lot of money. How do you keep focus on football? Because like Ryan Clark was talking about how he drove a beat up old pickup as a rookie, and he was just trying to make some kind of respectable money. How do you maintain your focus, and how do you maintain your drive while you're already making all that money?
Without this guy, I don't know where I would be, honestly. Like, I'm looking at your eyes, I don't know where I would be. So I'm blessed to have this, like, money and stuff, but, like, it don't make me. You know what I'm saying? Like, growing up, I didn't, my pops, when he was around, like, we had money when he was around, and stuff happened, and we lost everything. So, like, I know the feeling of having a lot and getting it taken away, just like that. So just like with this money now, you can get taken away now, so.
Okay, like, I really liked that, just in that knowledge and understanding that, man, like, this can go away immediately. And it's not like he was rich when he was a kid or anything, but like he had a comfortable, sounds like a middle class life, and then all of a sudden his dad was gone, and through very severe circumstances. He talks about that a little bit more later. But I think there's one thing that, one thing that happens with a lot of guys in the NFL and life with all of us is that you get dealt these lessons early on. And, I don't know, like me personally, I had, my dad was an interesting character himself. And like, there are a lot of lessons that I didn't learn and really understand and grasp that made me a better person, but not until I was really in my 30s. And I don't think I would have had the personality to be a good quarterback. I would have been a hell of a defensive lineman because they're allowed to be volatile and crazy. But as far as learning those lessons and taking them and putting them into action, and I think the one thing you start to hear from CJ Stroud is this devotion or this commitment to learning how to be a good leader. And also, I think because of his experience with his father, like the understanding, the knowledge, like you have to be able to recognize that everybody's imperfect before you can really, I think, become somebody that people follow, because you got to be able to accept the people that are following you before they're going to follow you, before they accept you. And he's got that, like he's got a depth to him because of the experiences that he's had. Without, like, I don't want to get overly dramatic about this or anything. It's just he talks about it in a way that's different than, some guys love to point out how hard they had it coming up and almost use it as a badge of honor, which is fine, I think, when you're a young man. But when you're a quarterback making $30 million guaranteed, you're not allowed to be a young man. Like, you got to be an old soul. You got to be mature beyond your years. And that's what I'm starting to get that sense from CJ Stroud. I think the other part about this too, the two more things about staying focused and staying hungry despite making a whole bunch of money either through NIL or a rookie contract. This is just some of the advice he says he gives his teammates about how to deal with either, haters, critics, whatever you want to call them.
I think, like, the fact, like, that I'm trying to get to is I love this game. Like, I don't know where I would be. And I get up with the same type of mindset every day, like somebody trying to take my job.
Oh, yeah, this is him talking about getting up with the mindset of I jumped the gun. This is him talking about just keeping that mentality of staying hungry.
Somebody trying to do this to my family, somebody trying to, you know what I'm saying? I just wake up, I kind of create a vision in my head, like somebody after me, man, and that's the truth.
And I liked him telling that story to Ryan Clark, just because I know that Ryan Clark would have gotten to Pittsburgh several years after Greg Lloyd was gone, but I'm guessing he knew Greg Lloyd, and Greg Lloyd was like psychotic in terms of just keeping that narrative in your head. And I think James Harrison, who played with Ryan Clark, was that same way, because James Harrison was cut however many times, 5 times, 6 times before he actually latched on. Like, there's that. I think Ryan Clark really appreciated that sentiment from CJ Stroud, because like Pittsburgh's always had this vein of guys that are psychotically paranoid about somebody coming to take their job. A story I've told before was when I was with Jacksonville, we were playing Pittsburgh, and this was back when those were the two teams at the top of the old AFC Central. They were just battles. And Keenan McCardle got hit by Greg Lloyd over the middle. And as Greg Lloyd was dropping out in his zone coverage, and Greg Lloyd got up talking about how Keenan better never call his house again. Keenan's been calling, you've been calling my house, trying to talk to my woman. And Keenan's looking at him like, what the hell are you talking about, man? It was just this story that Greg Lloyd had created in his head. No, look, Greg Lloyd, unlike I think CJ Stroud, probably also had some demons that drove him. It was fine for a defensive player, but not necessarily a quarterback. As far as the advice that he gives the teammates about dealing with critics, and he doused in quite a few examples here of the clips that I don't have on here of just what he talks to his teammates about being an example for his teammates. Just a lot of cool stuff.
You can be doing good, you can be bad, you can be ugly, you can be cute. People gonna talk about you regardless. It really don't matter. So you might as well just do you. Be yourself, you know what I'm saying? Trust what God planned for your life.
Okay, yeah. So, and like that's a perspective that's obviously easy to talk about, easy to say. I feel like playing at Ohio State, he made a few comments on here about just like how rabid the Ohio State fans are. That is something that big time college quarterbacks face, that I think in a lot of ways is more pressure than anything they face in the NFL. Because I don't care how many millions of people are watching you on television, when you're walking through campus or when you've got 110,000 people in a stadium, and college football fans are psychotically irrational about things like that. That's a lot of pressure. The potential of being a number 1 pick overall. Ryan Clark asked him about that and how he feels about it.
To me, it's not really a focus of mine at all. I'm so caught in this team right now. Like I said earlier, like I love my teammates to death. Like they realize, like just our last year, like Bichon said, like 11-2, that's not good enough at Ohio State. That's not good. That's not my standard. And I think the reason why I might be the number 1 pick, whatever the case may be, won't be because of my play. It won't be because of that. If you go in my locker room, you're gonna ask my guys, like, what type of leader is CJ? What type of guy is CJ? What does he do? Like, how is he with y'all? I think that's way bigger than football.
Yeah, and the other thing too about this is, and I really don't mean this to bash on anybody in particular or Deshaun Watson. I think that I do think that if you think about like Deshaun had a rough upbringing too, and had to learn and fend for himself on his own a lot. But like with Deshaun, there was a lot of talk about himself, and again, like I really don't want to bash on Deshaun. I think like as a football player, I think he's going to be very good this year. I think that was a blip on the radar last year, but I just, by way of contrast, every time CJ Stroud is asked questions like these, he'll answer the question about himself, but I think he just truly looks like he's focused on and understanding that his role, and for him to achieve greatness or anybody else, like he's got to be focused outward towards the team. Ryan Day had talked about that he made a conscious transition going into this last year. So it is something he's worked at. I had said in a previous podcast that I want my guys to come out of the womb as natural born leaders. Yes, that's true. I do understand with a better depth now, I think, exactly how CJ Stroud got to where he is right now. Okay. Then there was just a interesting little story here about like leading by example and the pressure, like what it means to lead by example. A lot of people say lead by example. It feels like he has been taught exactly what it means to lead by example. Ryan Day and his college strength coach taught him this lesson.
I can't have a bad day. Like Coach Day says that to me all the time. And I realized, like, at first I was like, man, what is you talking about, man? Like, what you mean I can't have a bad day? I'm a human like everybody else. But like after like really like thinking about it and putting my feelings aside and just going straight to business, like going on the business side, like that makes a lot of sense. As a quarterback, you can't have a bad day. You can't be in the facility tired, can't be in the facility yawning, going through the motions. You got to be on it because the energy you set is with the team. Like,
okay, and that's like I think that honestly is one of the more impressive things that I've heard out of a prospect, because a lot of times when you ask people about leadership, they'll give you a bunch of cliches. But it's hard to define leadership because there's so many different forms of it. And even leadership by example, a lot of times it boils down to like, okay, you're a hard worker. Then people see you working hard. I think leadership by example and just projecting a persona and understanding that eyes are on you all the time. That's something that like Cam Newton had to learn. That's something that guys like Ryan Leaf never learned. Or Jeff George. I think Eli Manning had to learn that and understand exactly how much people were looking at him. And it's not always about being a vocal leader. It's just about projecting a persona. Head coach, that's really important for head coaches too, man. Head coach, if the head coach looks like a basket case, you've got a team full of basket cases. As far as another aspect of leadership, lesson from Ed Orgeron that I'm going to have Sean Pendergast reenact tomorrow. This is good. His little story about watching the Super Bowl with Ed Orgeron.
Coach O at the Super Bowl, me and Coach O sat there probably the whole game and chopped it up just on like, because I'm like, Coach, I want to win the Natty. What do I got to do, Coach? Coach O, what do I got to do? His crazy voice, like he like couldn't understand a lot what he was saying, but I could understand like most of it. And the main thing he was speaking to me was leadership. He's like, Joe was a leader. Like Joe, who wouldn't ask nobody to do something and not go do it.
Okay, he's talking about Joe Burrow there. Joe Burrow, who was like, he's like that dude. Like people respected him. And Joe Burrow, if he said it, he was going to do it. And he was going to do everything else that everybody else did. So Joe Burrow had a lot of respect at Ohio State, even as a transfer. Like post-mortem, they were still talking about Joe Burrow. They were still delivering the Joe Burrow eulogy up at Ohio State. And that part too, like I think just seeking out that part about winning the championship, the fact that he waited until 2 weeks, or he waited right until the last moment to announce that he was entering the draft. Like I know the conspiracies floated out there by talk radio hosts might have been that he was like seeing how much money he could get for NIL, and maybe that was the case. But I think he also did really want to win a national championship and felt like he had unfinished business. At some point, you got to make a good business decision. And here's the most that I put in here about how he handled when his dad was arrested. And he talks about how his dad had been arrested 25 years before this next incident and had gotten himself straight and was a pastor in the church, and that, CJ Stroud grew up in the church, working in the church, doing things, reaching out to people with his father and everything. So it was a huge shock when his father was arrested and put away for a 38-year sentence on some tough charges. It's a lot for a young man to deal with. I cut this up a little bit for brevity, but I think I maintained the whole spirit of it.
When my pops left, I didn't want nothing to do with God. I was bitter. I didn't want to know anything. I didn't want to go to church, none of that. And I have a teammate, his name's Cant Have. And I love you, Cam. Like, bro, you saved my life. And Cam took me to church. Probably like my second weekend. And I broke down on my knees and started crying. I just realized, like, man, I missed this, man. Like, just the conviction that you have when you step into that holy place. And I just realized after that, I called my pops. And honestly, I can do a better job even now talking to him. But when I talk to him, it's nothing but love. You know what I'm saying? And it's no ill will to my pops. I love him to death. I know he'll probably watch this. I love you, Dad. Like,
and there's a second part to this, but as far as just that kind of processing those things, like I talked earlier about those things that happen to you when you're a kid, and a lot of times you don't learn until you're older to really let go of it and forgive your parents or forgive people who wronged you when you were younger. I just really sense from this and from reading about CJ Stroud, like there's a guy that learned how to learn those lessons, but also learned what to let go of. And he talks about that, like when he has a chip on his shoulder, he also recognizes that he's got to have perspective on those things and that you can use it to motivate yourself, but you can't be like Baker Mayfield and let that chip on your shoulder overpower you or distract you. So it's a much more focused individual than I even realized. I kind of had read the blurbs about him. But this is like, he's been through some stuff and come out a better person for it. This last bit is a really, like, this is a sad thing to hear. But a really important lesson for a young guy that's about to have 30 million guaranteed put into his lap. There's a lot going on in this next clip, but of talking about what it was like after his father was arrested and CJ Stroud was 13 years old.
But I love my mama too. Like, without her, I would not be here for a fact. She taught me so much. Like, no one cares for real. No one cared about us. Like, even though we helped them people for 25 plus years, my pops put people in homes, helped people out in the community, went back to his hood and helped. At the end of the day, like, no one came back to help us. But God wouldn't be my heart if I didn't forgive for that. I'm not bitter because, you know what I mean? You got to forgive, because as a Christian, who am I if I don't forgive?
Because, dude, I'll tell you, man, for one, on the religious side of it, yes, I think that's the lesson, right? That's what you're striving for, and it's one of the hardest things in the world to do. Very, very, very hard to do. I'd like, me thinking pragmatically as a fan of a team or as an employer, I think one of the things that does players in financially, which leads to a whole lot of stress that can affect your play on the field, it's not the cliche, player blows all his money on bad investments in a private jet or anything. A lot of times it is on wanting to help too much the people around you in ways that don't actually help them. And I think that's one lesson you learn over time is that, you know what, when you really learn when you're done playing is a lot of the people that you help out really almost have no memory that you helped them out. So like, if you go into anything with the notion of reciprocity or doing it because you're looking for respect or you're looking for, somebody to help you out on the other side of it, that can be a fool's errand. And like, you gotta practice charity for the sake of genuine charity. But he also in this interview mentioned a couple times about, with his NIL money, when he's helping people out, he really wants to help them out by putting them in position. And I'm guessing he might either by education or by helping them, invest in their careers or whatever, putting them in position to help themselves. instead of just handing them money. And like that's a good perspective to have on things. And like the fact that he's able to say that, I actually watched that last bit like 4 times. The fact that he was able to have that conversation and talk about that without really apparently any grudge still on his shoulders about all that, I think it's a big sign of maturity. So I want Bryce Young to be the Texans quarterback. I still feel the best about his upside as a quarterback, the it factor, the anticipation, all those things that Sid was talking about. But there's a chance that the Texans just aren't going to have a chance to draft Bryce Young, at which point there's no part of me now that feels like, okay, if you can't draft Bryce Young, then don't draft anybody else at all. I'm very open to them taking other options, and CJ Stroud is the most likely one. The more I learn about him and watch him and think about, what are the knocks on him in his game, there is still at the very core of it the potential for a very good quarterback. So, and also remember, as much as I love Bryce Young, I'm terrified about how tiny he is. So I will be able to flip the switch like that immediately. And I do encourage anybody to subscribe to Fred Taylor's podcast, The Pivot. It's awesome. They do a really, really good job. They typically do at least one interview a week, and they're always really, really good. So let's, and as Watch the Film suggests, please like, subscribe, tell a friend, all that stuff. And I appreciate it, guys.